The British government's UFO project. What is it? It's essentially, if I'm being flippant about it, I sometimes call it Son of Blue Book, because it's pretty much like what Blue Book was, but on a smaller scale, and we got into it a little bit later than you. First, I've forgotten my little disclaimer. I'll get into trouble. I'm still a serving member of Her Majesty's government. I still work at the Ministry of Defence, though not on the UFO job anymore, not on their project. Therefore, although I'm speaking with their permission and full knowledge, I am speaking, of course, in a private capacity this evening, so please don't think that I'm appearing here as a spokesperson for Her Majesty's government. And also, although my presentation will obviously touch on a number of areas which have, well, at the time were classified, but now declassified, because this is a public presentation. It's of course a presentation, a briefing, whatever you call it, at the unclassified level. With those little disclaimers out of the way, who set up the MOD's UFO project? Why was it set up? What did it do? Let's get into that. There's an interesting piece of history here, in that the key person, the person who really, I suppose, sowed the seeds of our project, was the great World War II hero, the brilliant radar scientist, Sir Henry Tizard. And after the Second World War, Winston Churchill brought Tizard back into government from academia and charged him with trying to sort out some of the inter-service rivalries that were bedeviling scientific and technical issues in the Ministry of Defence. All the turf wars going on between Army, Navy and Air Force, all the rivalries, all the squabbles and the pettiness, and Churchill thought that Tizard was someone to bring back, so he created, he made Tizard Chief Scientific Advisor. And in 1950, Sir Henry Tizard said that UFO sightings, which he was aware of coming in from Britain, but also from Europe, from America, and all around the world, UFO sightings, Tizard said, should not be dismissed without some form of proper scientific investigation. And that's, I think, a commendable viewpoint to come to this subject from. What he was effectively saying is, I don't care about your belief system, I don't care what you think you know, or you think you might want to believe about UFOs, just look at the data, see what we've got, see where the data take us. So, it being Britain, and it being the government, and the civil service, the great bureaucracy, we did what we always do. We set up a sort of a study group to look into it. We set up a committee. But it was probably the most strangely named, most beautifully named group ever to have been set up by our Ministry of Defence. And it's just so wonderful to see these now declassified documents, classified secret and top secret. You can see them at the MOD's website, mod.uk. We decided to call this committee the Flying Saucer Working Party. I told you it was fantastically named. You know, you can imagine all these stuffy old government civil servants, all these very serious scientific and technical intelligence people. And what are you doing? Oh, I'm on the Flying Saucer Working Party. Right. Anyway, the Flying Saucer Working Party was effectively a mixture of Air Force personnel, civil servant, bureaucrat, civil service figures, and scientific and technical intelligence specialists. And all these people from all these related but slightly different disciplines came together and met every now and then, and they thought about this for about a year. Interestingly, they went out and got alongside some of the American personnel involved in, well, I guess at the time it was called Sign, Grudge and Blue Book, but they got alongside the Americans on this, and it's interesting. And again, I urge you to look out for this document. It's on the MOD's website, and it gives an interesting insight, perhaps, into the post-war relationship between Britain and America, and how the balance of power had shifted even further away from the British Empire and towards the emergence of the United States as really a dominant superpower. Possibly very much at our expense. And it was obvious that on the UFO issue we were coming to the game late, and we were going out to the Americans and really asking you, well, what is this all about? Can you tell us what you know since your studies began in 1947? So we were a little bit slow off the mark, perhaps, and one can read in the final report of the Flying Saucer Working Party the clear American influence that I think has been with the British UFO project really since its inception. Now, in fact, that's slightly misleading, because the Flying Saucer Working Party concluded that there was nothing to UFOs. It was all nonsense. It was all either misidentifications, psychological delusions, or hoaxes. It was an extremely skeptical report, and its recommendation was that no further studies be undertaken into UFOs, and no further resources expanded on this particular subject. And that's where things would have stayed were it not for one thing: events. I always say that ufology is events-led. It's not led by what people think they know about UFOs. It's not really led by the researchers. It's led by events. If you have a big wave of sightings, you'll be dragged kicking and screaming back into ufology whether you like it or not. And that's more true of government than of anyone, in a sense, because just a few months after the Flying Saucer Working Party delivered their skeptical final report and their recommendation for no further action, a series of high-profile events involving the Royal Air Force took place. Just the sorts of things that Steve was talking about when he introduced me. UFOs seen by pilots, UFOs seen in close proximity to military bases, UFOs tracked on radar, jets been scrambled to try and intercept these UFOs. And when that happens, you can't just sit back and ignore it and say, well, it's probably just weather balloons or hoaxes. You've got to actually take a look, because, of course, the Air Force are charged with the defense of our airspace. The responsibility is to make sure that we know what's flying in our skies. And if we don't know and there's something there, we want to go and find out. So the Royal Air Force and the British government, possibly with some reluctance, but really through events, were dragged back into the UFO subject. And a UFO project was set up. And that UFO project has run ever since and continues to run to this day, albeit the emphasis has now, I think, shifted away from research and investigation and is moving on to freedom of information. But I'll come on to that in a little while.